I was just picking up the mail, like any normal morning. The sun wasn't even up yet, and the world still felt quiet, like it hadn't decided what kind of day it was going to be. I wasn't expecting anything unusual, just bills, flyers, maybe that coupon booklet my wife always tosses but I pretend to care about just to make conversation. But then I saw it. A white envelope, crisp and clean, with the logo of the hospital where Leah, my wife, was getting her prenatal checkups. It was addressed to her, not me, but we never kept secrets, not really, not until that morning when something in my gut told me not to just hand it over and forget about it, something about the weight of the envelope, the neatness of the print, or maybe just the way my hand trembled a little as I held it. I wish I could say I hesitated, that I debated doing the right thing and walking it inside, putting it on the counter next to her coffee cup and waiting for her to open it in front of me like we always did, but I didn't. I tore it open right there at the mailbox. Inside was a folded piece of paper, an ultrasound summary and an appointment confirmation, and right beneath the photo, there it was in bold letters. Estimated due date, October 9th. I read it again. October 9th. And that was when my whole world twisted on itself, like I was falling down a spiral staircase I hadn't even noticed I was standing on, because I was in the hospital for emergency surgery from July to mid-September, a freak accident at work, a collapsed lung and a ruptured appendix. I was sedated for days, hooked to tubes, barely coherent most of the time, the kind of sick where time doesn't make sense anymore. Which means, there's no way this baby is mine. The paper trembled in my hands as the realization hit me, thick and cold like ice water pouring down my spine. I stood there in the driveway staring at the photo of a child I thought was ours, whose heartbeat we had listened to together on her phone just last week, and I suddenly felt like a stranger watching someone else's life unravel. I walked back inside like I was sleepwalking. I could hear Leah in the kitchen humming to herself, the scent of cinnamon toast and decaf coffee wafting through the air. She smiled when she saw me, her hair pulled back, her belly showing under the soft sweater she loved to wear. She looked beautiful and cruel. "Hey babe, anything good in the mail?" she asked with that same smile I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago, and I wanted to scream, to ask her who the hell the father was, to throw the envelope on the table like a grenade and let everything blow up, but instead I said, "Just bills." And I kissed her cheek like nothing had changed, like I wasn't dying inside. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went through the motions, nodded at the right times, even made dinner, but my mind was stuck on a loop. October 9th, October 9th, October 9th, and every time I looked at her, I felt like I was looking at a liar, a stranger, a woman I never really knew. That night, while she slept, I sat in the living room with that envelope in my lap, staring at the date again and again, trying to make the math work, trying to convince myself there was some other explanation, but there wasn't. She cheated on me while I was lying in a hospital bed fighting for my life. And now she was carrying his child. I didn't sleep that night, and by morning, I knew what I had to do. I had to find out who it was. I needed a name, a face, a reason, something I could hold on to because the silence was killing me. So I started with the obvious, her phone. I knew the passcode, she never changed it, and while she was in the shower I opened it and started scrolling through her texts, her call logs, her emails, anything that might give me a clue. And there it was. A string of deleted texts from a number with no name, but one message remained, buried in her notes app, like a reminder she didn't want to forget. "I hate that it had to happen that way, but thank you for saving him. I could never repay you. Ever." My blood went cold. I copied the number and ran it through a reverse lookup site, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. And when the name came up on the screen, I nearly dropped the phone. Ethan Marks. My best friend. My best man at our wedding. The guy who sat with me during the first week in the hospital, who brought flowers for Leah, who drove her home late at night when she didn't want to take a cab, who laughed and told me I was too stubborn to die. Him. I felt the rage clawing at my chest, hot and sharp, and for a second I wanted to break something, scream, drive to his house and beat the truth out of him, but I didn't. Instead I sat down and tried to remember every moment I might have missed, every glance, every touch, every joke that had a little too much warmth behind it. It was all there. Right in front of me the whole time. Later that day, I called him, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey man," I said, "I wanted to thank you again for everything during the hospital. Seriously, I heard you helped out a lot with Leah. I don't remember much from that time." He paused, just a little too long. "Yeah man, of course," he said, his voice too smooth, too polite. "Anything for you, you know that." "I was wondering if we could grab a drink or something, catch up," I said, trying to sound casual. Another pause. Sure, yeah, tonight. Perfect, I said, and hung up. I didn't tell Leah, I just said I was going to the store, and when I got to the bar, I was already shaking with the weight of what I knew and what I was about to do. Ethan was already there, sitting at the far booth, smiling like he didn't have a care in the world. And I sat down across from him, looked him in the eye, and said the one thing I knew would crack the truth wide open. I saw the due date. And just like that, the smile dropped from his face like someone had turned off the light behind his eyes. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and then said in a voice I barely recognized. Let me explain. He said it so quietly I almost didn't hear him, like the words were too heavy to say out loud, like, let me explain, could somehow undo the wreckage he helped cause. I stared at him, my best friend, the man who had stood beside me through breakups, college, near-death hangovers, and now, this. You have 10 seconds, I said, and my voice wasn't loud but it was sharp, it cut through the noise of the bar like a blade, and I saw him flinch. He looked down, ran his hand through his hair like he needed something to do with his guilt, or maybe it wasn't guilt, maybe it was fear of what I'd do, fear of finally being caught. I didn't mean for it to happen, he said, I still locked on the scratched wood of the table, it wasn't supposed to be like that, she was falling apart, man, and you were, God, you were half dead in that hospital, I didn't know if you were gonna make it. So you slept with her? I asked, my voice cold, like I wasn't even inside my body anymore, like I was listening to someone else's story. No, he said quickly, then winced, not at first, I mean, not like it just happened, we were both broken and scared, and I was trying to take care of her and one night you just decided to help her out of her clothes. I snapped, and his face turned pale. He didn't defend himself, he didn't fight back, and that somehow made it worse, because if he had yelled, if he had tried to lie, I could have hated him properly, but instead he just looked like a man drowning in his own shame. She was crying, he said, finally meeting my eyes, she thought you were going to die, that she'd be a widow before 30, and the hospital bills were insane, man, your insurance only covered part of the surgery, and they were gonna transfer you if the full payment didn't go through. I froze. What are you talking about? He sighed, like he'd been holding this in for months. They were gonna move you to a public facility, no ICU, no specialists, just basic care. She didn't tell you, because she didn't want to scare you, but she was begging them to keep you in that room with the machines and the staff that actually had a shot at saving you. So you paid it, I said slowly, the pieces starting to twist into something even uglier than betrayal, you paid the rest of the hospital bill. He nodded, ashamed, like that was the real crime. I put it on my card, $23,000, she cried when I did it, said she couldn't take that from me, I said it was for you, not her, but she still felt guilty. And she paid you back with her body, I said, the words bitter and raw on my tongue. I didn't ask her to, he said quickly, I swear to God, I didn't. She came to my place one night, she said she couldn't sleep, that she hated herself for what she was putting you through, she hugged me and it just went too far. I stared at him, trying to see if he believed his own story, if he actually thought that made it better. How many times? I asked. Just once, he whispered, I swear, just that night. I nodded slowly, like I understood, but my mind was screaming, because it didn't matter if it was once or 100 times, the woman I loved, the one I'd built a life with, had broken the one rule we promised never to break, and she did it with him. So the baby? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He swallowed hard, looked down again, and said, she told me she wasn't sure, but the dates, they line up, it's probably mine. The air went still. I sat back in the booth, staring at this man I'd called a brother for over a decade, and I didn't know whether to cry or punch him in the face. Instead, I stood up, calm and cold, and said, you're going to stay away from us, from now on, no visits, no calls, nothing. Wait, he started, but I cut him off. I'll figure out what to do about her, but you're done, Ethan. And I walked out of that bar without looking back, because if I did, I might have gone back in and torn the whole place down. When I got home, Leah was asleep on the couch, curled up like she hadn't just detonated our marriage. I stood there for a long time, watching her breathe, wondering how many lies she'd told with that same peaceful face, and then I went upstairs and locked myself in the guest room. The next morning, she knocked on the door, confused. Babe. Why didn't you come to bed, she asked, her voice soft and sweet, and I felt sick. I opened the door slowly and stared at her belly, at the life growing inside her, at the proof of everything she swore we'd never do to each other. "We need to talk," I said, and her face fell. We sat on the couch in silence for a long time before I finally said, "I saw the envelope." She blinked, trying to process, then her shoulders sagged like all the lies had finally gotten too heavy to carry. "How much do you know?" she whispered. "Everything," I said. "Ethan told me." She covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling before she even spoke, and for a moment I hated myself for still caring how much she was hurting. "I didn't want it to happen," she said. "I didn't plan it, I thought you were going to die, and I was alone and terrified, and he was there, and I trusted you," I said, "with everything, and while I was fighting to stay alive, you gave yourself to someone else." She shook her head, crying harder now. "It wasn't like that, I wasn't thinking, I hated myself the moment it happened, and when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know what to do, I kept hoping it was yours, that maybe. But it's not," I said, "we both know it's not." She nodded slowly, like admitting it was breaking her in half. "I wanted to tell you," she said, "every day, but you were still recovering, and I couldn't bring myself to destroy you all over again." I stood up, because I couldn't sit still any longer. "I don't know what I'm going to do," I said honestly. "I don't know if I can stay, or if I want to raise a child that's not mine, a child that came from betrayal." She looked up at me, eyes swollen. "But you love me," she said, "don't you?" And that was the worst part. Because I did. And I hated her for it. I didn't answer her question, not really. I just stood there, staring at the floor like it had the solution written on it, like if I stared long enough I'd find a way to go back, to undo it all, to wake up in that hospital bed and have it all just be a dream. But it wasn't. She was still crying softly on the couch, and I was still standing with my hands clenched at my sides, caught between the man I used to be and whatever was left of me now. "Don't you?" She'd asked, like love was supposed to fix this, like love was supposed to be enough after everything she'd done, and maybe that's what hurt the most, that some part of me still did love her, even after the betrayal, even after the lies. I walked out of the room without saying a word. I heard her call after me, but I kept going, into the garage, into the car, anywhere but near her. I didn't even know where I was driving. I just needed to move, needed air, needed space between me and that house that used to feel like home but now just felt like a tomb. I ended up at a park we used to go to when we were dating, years ago, back when we were broke and stupid and thought forever was something you could promise with a smile and a cheap ring. I sat on the bench by the lake, the one where I'd first told her I wanted to marry her, and I tried to remember what that moment felt like. But it was gone. Burned away by hospital bills and quiet affairs and whispered apologies that came too late. My phone buzzed, and I ignored it, then it buzzed again, and again, until finally I looked down and saw Ethan's name. I should have blocked him. But I answered. "What?" I said, no emotion, just cold air between us. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, and his voice actually cracked a little. "I know that doesn't mean anything, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I swear to you, man, I never wanted to hurt you." I almost laughed, because how do you say something like that after sleeping with your best friend's wife? How do you pretend like it wasn't a choice you made every step of the way? "You didn't just hurt me," I said, "you destroyed me." "I know," he whispered, "and I'm not asking you to forgive me, I wanted you to know, I'm moving away, out of state. I already told Leah, I won't be part of the baby's life unless she asks me to be, and I'll stay out of yours, for good." Silence hung there like a final breath before drowning. "Why now?" I asked. "Why leave now?" "Because if I stay, I'll keep hoping you'll forgive me," he said, "and I don't deserve that." He hung up before I could say anything else, and I just sat there, phone in hand, heart a mess of shattered pieces I didn't know how to put back together. I went home hours later, the sun already down, the sky bruised with dusk, and I walked into the house like I didn't live there anymore, like it was someone else's life waiting behind that door. Leah was in the kitchen, eyes swollen, her face pale, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea she hadn't touched. She didn't say anything when she saw me, just looked at me like I was something fragile and dangerous at the same time. I sat down at the table across from her, leaned forward, and said, "What now?" She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "I mean," I said, slower this time, "what happens now, Leah? Do we pretend this didn't happen? Do we play house while you grow his child inside you? Do we smile at baby showers and hold hands at doctor's appointments while I die a little more inside every time I look at you?" She closed her eyes, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. I don't know, she whispered, I don't know what you want me to do. I don't want you to do anything, I said, and suddenly I felt the anger shift into something else, exhaustion. I just want the truth, Leah, all of it, no more half-answers, no more pretty lies, I want to know everything. She looked up at me slowly, and I saw something in her face change, like a mask falling off, and for the first time in days, I saw the woman I'd married, the one who used to laugh at my bad jokes and cry at sad movies. I was in love with him, she said, and the world stopped. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. I didn't mean to be, I didn't want to be, but I was so scared and so alone, and he was there, and he understood what I was going through, and you were gone even though you were technically still breathing, she said, voice shaking. I hated myself every day, but I loved you, and I loved him, and I didn't know how to carry both. And now? I asked, barely able to get the words out. Now I just feel empty, she said, he's leaving, and you can barely look at me, and I'm carrying a baby that might ruin both of our lives, and I don't know who I am anymore. I stared at her for a long time, and I didn't feel anger anymore, not even betrayal, I just felt tired, like the kind of tired that sinks into your bones and never leaves. I need time, I said, and she nodded like she expected that, like she'd already said it to herself 100 times. Where will you go? She asked quietly. I don't know, I said, maybe to my brother's for a while, maybe just drive until the road stops. I want to make this right, she said, her voice breaking, even if you never forgive me, I want to do something to fix what I broke. I didn't answer, because there was no fixing this, not really, but I didn't tell her that. I just stood up, packed a small bag, and left. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror at the house we'd built, at the porch light still on, like it was waiting for me to come home, and I wondered if I ever really would. Because some wounds don't heal. They just scar. I drove through the night without knowing where I was going, just kept my foot on the gas and my hands tight on the wheel like motion itself might hold me together. I didn't cry, not once, because something inside me felt locked, frozen, like if I let one tear slip out, I'd unravel completely. The road was mostly empty, the occasional headlights passing like ghosts, and every few miles I'd glance at the passenger seat, half expecting Leah to be there, even though I'd left her behind, even though part of me knew I might never go back. By morning, I was parked outside my brother's house, just sitting there in the driveway like a stranger. I hadn't called, hadn't texted, just showed up like a man returning from war who didn't know how to speak his own language anymore. He opened the door wearing boxers and a t-shirt with a coffee stain, his hair wild and his eyes half closed, but the second he saw my face, he sobered up. Jesus, he muttered, stepping aside without even asking, come in. I dropped my bag just inside the door and collapsed onto his couch like gravity had finally won, and he just stood there, watching me for a second, then sat across from me with a quiet sigh. What happened? He asked gently. I didn't answer right away, didn't know where to start or if I even could, so I just stared at the floor until the words came out, raw and slow. She cheated on me. Silence. He blinked, leaned forward, hands clasped together. Leah, he asked, like he had to be sure, like maybe there was some other wife I'd forgotten to mention. I nodded, the word catching in my throat before I could say it. With Ethan, I added, and that one hit harder. I saw it in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened, the way his whole posture changed. You've gotta be kidding, he muttered, standing up and pacing like the information burned his skin. Ethan. Your best man. That Ethan. I nodded again, slowly, because saying it out loud still didn't make it feel any more real. She was scared, I said quietly, back when I was in the hospital, the surgery, the bills, she didn't know what to do, and he stepped in. Yeah, well, he stepped in all right, my brother snapped, then stopped himself and sat back down, rubbing his face. Sorry, I don't even know what to say, man. I'm not sure I do either, I said, and for a moment we just sat there, the weight of it all hanging between us. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, what now? You staying here a while? I don't know, I said, I needed to get out of that house, away from her, from everything, I don't even know if I want to go back. Do you still love her? He asked, and that one hit hard. Because the truth was, yeah, I did. Even now, even after all of it, some part of me still remembered the way she used to laugh in her sleep, or how she'd hum off-key when she made pancakes on Sunday mornings, and it made me hate myself, that I still loved someone who had shattered me that deeply. I think I hate her and love her at the same time, I said, and my brother didn't try to fix it, he just nodded. That's normal, he said, people don't stop loving each other just because something breaks, they stop loving each other when they choose to stop. And what if I want to stop but I can't? I asked. He looked at me and said, then you've got a hell of a fight ahead of you, but it's your fight, not hers, not Ethan's, yours. I stayed at his place for a few days, not doing much, just breathing, existing, letting the numbness wear off enough that I could start feeling again without falling apart. He didn't push, didn't ask questions unless I started talking, and I was grateful for that. On the fourth day, Leah called. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering, heart pounding even though I didn't know why. Hey, she said softly. Hi, I replied, the word dry in my throat. I just wanted to check on you, she said, make sure you're safe, that you're eating, sleeping, whatever people do when they disappear. I could hear the edge of a smile in her voice, but it was tired, broken, like she was trying to pretend there was still a part of us that could talk like we used to. I'm okay, I said, then after a beat, where are you? Still at the house, she said, I didn't go anywhere, not that there's anywhere to go, I've just been sitting here, trying to figure out what my life is now. I closed my eyes, leaned back against the couch, and said, I don't know what to do. I know, she whispered, neither do I. Silence stretched out, heavy and thick, and then she said, can we talk? Not on the phone. I mean really talk, face to face. Just once. I hesitated, everything in me screaming to say no, to protect myself, to keep the distance safe and wide, but I needed closure, or clarity, or maybe just to see if there was anything left between us that hadn't died. Okay, I said, tomorrow. Afternoon. We met at the park, the same one I'd sat at days earlier, but now the sun was out, the birds were loud, and families were laughing in the distance like nothing bad ever happened in the world. She looked tired, pale, but she was still Leah, still the woman I fell in love with once upon a time, and that hurt more than anything. I'm not going to beg you to stay, she said first, I know I don't deserve that, I'm not going to make excuses or try to rewrite what happened, I just want to tell you the truth, and then you can decide what to do. I nodded slowly, letting her speak. I didn't cheat on you because I stopped loving you, she said, I cheated because I thought I'd already lost you, and that doesn't make it better, I know, but I need you to understand, it didn't come from betrayal, it came from grief, from fear, from this horrible, hopeless place I didn't know how to climb out of. I needed you, I said, quietly, and you gave yourself to someone else. She looked away, tears in her eyes, and said, I know. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I said, but I'm also not ready to walk away forever. Not yet. She looked at me then, not with hope exactly, but something close, a fragile kind of gratitude. I'll do whatever it takes, she said, therapy, space, honesty, anything. Even if you just want to be friends who co-parent, or strangers who talk once a year, I'll do it. I stood up, heart pounding, and said, I'm going to need time. A lot of it. And I might still walk away in the end. I understand, she said, and for once, I believed her. I didn't go back home right away, even after that talk in the park, even after Leah said everything I thought I needed to hear, because words were cheap now, and even the truth sounded fragile when it came from someone who'd broken you. Instead, I stayed at my brother's place, living out of a small duffel bag, sleeping on the lumpy pull-out couch, eating microwave dinners and trying to remind myself how to breathe without pain. Leah and I texted occasionally, nothing deep, just check-ins, short sentences, like we were tiptoeing around the wreckage, afraid to touch anything too sharp, too real. She sent me a photo one morning, a sonogram, the baby's tiny shape barely visible, captioned with, they said everything looks healthy. I stared at that picture for a long time, longer than I meant to, because no matter what had happened, no matter who the biological father was, that thing, that life, was tied to me now, not by blood maybe, but by something else, something more complicated. I didn't reply right away, and she didn't double text or call or ask for a reaction, which somehow made me respect her a little more, even while everything still felt like glass between us. My brother tried not to pry, but one night, after we split a pizza and watched half a basketball game in silence, he finally said, "Are you gonna raise that kid?" I looked at him, blinked, then looked away again, because the answer wasn't simple. "I don't know," I said finally, "I mean, he's not mine, not really, but he's hers, and I still don't know how to stop loving her." He nodded slowly, like he understood, but also didn't know what to say to that. Being a dad's more than biology, he said after a while, it's about who shows up, who stays, who sacrifices. You already did all that for her once, even before the baby, and now. I don't know, Mun, maybe this is your call to make, not anyone else's. And I hated how much that hit me, because I'd been looking for a reason to walk away, to wipe my hands clean and start fresh somewhere far away, but the truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted to. Not completely. A few days later, I got a message from Ethan. I hadn't heard from him since he left town, like he said he would, and I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. I transferred the remaining balance of your hospital bills. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I want to leave something behind that doesn't hurt. I'm sorry, Mun. For everything. I read it twice, maybe 3 times, and each time the words twisted differently, like a knife that couldn't decide where to cut. Because the awful truth. I didn't hate him the way I wanted to. I hated what he'd done. I hated the look in his eyes that day when I realized the truth, but deep down, buried under layers of betrayal, was this sick, bitter gratitude. He had saved me, even if the cost was everything I held dear. I deleted the message without replying, not because I forgave him, but because I didn't want to keep reopening that wound. Another week passed, and I finally agreed to go with Leah to one of her doctor appointments. I don't even know why I said yes. Maybe I wanted to see for myself, maybe some part of me wanted to feel something, anything. She looked surprised when I showed up in the waiting room, but she didn't say anything, just gave a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes and led me to the back where they took her vitals and prepped the monitor. When the heartbeat came through the speaker, fast and steady like a drum in the distance, I felt something crack open in my chest. It wasn't joy exactly, and it definitely wasn't peace. It was something raw, ancient, like instinct, like this is real now, this thing is happening whether you're ready or not. She glanced at me as I watched the screen, and for the first time in a long time, I saw tears in her eyes that weren't about guilt or fear, they were about awe, about life. Afterwards, we sat in the car for a while, neither of us speaking, just letting the silence fill the space like fog. You don't have to be involved, she said quietly. I know this is hard, and I'll never ask you for more than you're willing to give. I stared out the windshield and said, but what if I want to be involved? Not for you, for them. She looked at me, and her breath caught, just a small sound, but it felt like thunder. You'd be an amazing father, she whispered, and I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the first time in weeks I'd heard something that didn't sound like a lie. I'm not promising anything, I said, but I want to try. One step at a time. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheek, and for once, neither of us tried to wipe them away. The next few weeks blurred together, doctor visits, short phone calls, little check-ins that slowly grew into longer conversations. We didn't talk about the past much, didn't pick at the scabs we both carried. Instead we focused on the now, on building something steady, even if it was just a shaky bridge over what we'd lost. I started going back to the house a little more, not to stay, not yet, but to help paint the nursery, to carry groceries, to feel like I still belonged somewhere. One evening, while I was putting together a crib, she walked in and just stood in the doorway, watching me. You know, she said, I used to dream of this, you, building furniture, me with a belly full of baby, us laughing in our little bubble. Not quite the dream version, I said with a smirk, wiping sweat off my brow. No, she agreed, but maybe dreams aren't meant to be perfect, maybe they're just meant to survive. I didn't answer, just kept working, the sound of screws and wood and soft breathing filling the room. I still didn't know where this was going, if we'd ever be a couple again, if I could ever look at her without seeing him, but what I did know was this. I was still here. And sometimes, surviving was enough. For now. Things didn't fix themselves overnight, and maybe they never would, because this wasn't some movie where the couple finds their way back after a few dramatic confessions and a single moment of forgiveness. This was real life, messy and uneven, full of mornings where I woke up angry for no reason, and afternoons when I felt like I could almost touch something like peace. We were in this strange limbo, Leah and I, not quite rebuilding, not quite strangers, tied together by the baby growing inside her, but still walking on separate shores with a broken bridge between us. I started coming by more often, not just for the practical things like setting up the crib or hanging curtains, but for the quiet things, sitting on the couch while she watched old shows, going on short walks when her back started to ache, keeping her company when the nights got too long. We didn't talk about Ethan, not directly, not anymore. It felt like an agreement we never spoke out loud, that if we were going to try and move forward, we couldn't keep looking behind, but the silence didn't mean the wound had healed. One night, we were sitting on the back porch, the air cool and still, crickets humming like static in the distance, when she finally asked, "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I didn't answer right away, just leaned back in the chair and stared at the stars. "I think forgiveness is like grief," I said slowly. "You don't get over it, you just learn how to carry it." She nodded, pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders, and said, "That's fair." I could feel her watching me, waiting for more, but I didn't have more to give that night, not yet. A week later, something changed. It was subtle at first, a shift in how we moved around each other, a softness in the way she handed me tools while I fixed the squeaky cabinet door, a laugh that didn't feel forced when I told her a dumb joke. Then one afternoon, I found a letter on the kitchen counter, folded neatly, my name written on the front in her handwriting. I didn't open it right away, just stood there, heart pounding like I was holding something dangerous. When I finally read it, I had to sit down. The words were simple, honest, but they hit like a punch to the gut. "I know you're trying. I see it in everything you do. And I want you to know I don't expect you to love me again. But I hope, someday, maybe you can. Not for the past. But for the people we've become since we lost everything." It wrecked me more than if she'd begged, more than if she'd promised the world, because it wasn't a plea, it was a gift, space, honesty, and a quiet kind of hope I wasn't ready to hold, but couldn't quite ignore. I kept the letter in my jacket pocket, carried it around for days without knowing why, like maybe it anchored me to something that felt almost steady. Around that time, we went to a prenatal class together, couples breathing, silly positions, exercises that made us both laugh and blush like teenagers, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a version of us that didn't feel haunted. After the class, we got milkshakes and sat in the car watching the rain streak down the windshield. She rubbed her belly gently and said, "They said we should pick a name soon." I smiled, half joking, "How about Vengeance?" She laughed, really laughed, the kind that lit up her whole face, and for a second, I felt something deep in my chest unclench. "I was thinking something a little softer," she said, "like Eli. Or maybe Noah." I nodded slowly, repeating the names in my head, wondering what kind of person this child would become, and what role I'd play in that life. That night, I went home with her, not to stay, not yet, but long enough to fall asleep on the couch while she watched a movie, and when I woke up, there was a blanket over me and a note on the coffee table that just said, "Thank you for not giving up on me completely." But the peace didn't last. 2 days later, I ran into Ethan's sister at the grocery store. I didn't even know she still lived nearby, and her face lit up like she was about to congratulate me, until she realized the look on my face. "I heard you're back home," she said cautiously. "Are you two okay now?" I shrugged, trying to be polite, but I could feel something sour rising in my chest. "You know," she said, shifting awkwardly, "Ethan's been a mess. He hasn't talked to anyone since he left. I think he thought you'd kill him, honestly." I said nothing, just kept my eyes on the cart, heart pounding, because I didn't want to hear about his pain. I didn't want to know he missed me. I didn't want to feel anything but anger. But I did. I felt everything, and I hated it. When I got back to the house, Leah could tell something was off right away, and when I finally told her who I ran into, she went quiet. "I haven't talked to him," she said quickly, "not since that day, I swear." "I believe you," I said, and I did, for better or worse, I believed her, but it didn't make it easier, didn't make it less confusing. "I hate that I miss him," I confessed, surprising even myself. "I hate that I spent half my life thinking he was the closest thing I had to a brother, and now I can't even think about him without wanting to scream." She reached for my hand, slowly, gently, and I didn't pull away. "It's okay to feel both," she said, "to grieve and to miss. To be furious and still remember the good. It doesn't make you weak." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "I wish none of this had happened." "Me too," she said, her voice cracking, "every single day." We didn't talk much more that night, just sat there, hands still touching, not trying to fix anything, just being broken together. And maybe that was the closest thing to healing I'd felt in a long time. The morning Leah went into labor, I was at the house, fixing a cabinet hinge that had been crooked for weeks, and I remember thinking how strange it was, how life rarely gave you warnings, how 1 second you're adjusting a screwdriver and the next, you're standing there frozen while the woman you once weren't sure you could ever forgive tells you, in a shaking voice, that it's time. It happened fast and slow at the same time, like the world was rushing and standing still all at once, I drove her to the hospital in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other gripping hers, her breath coming in sharp, practiced gasps while my mind raced 1,000 miles in every direction. I didn't know how I felt. I couldn't even name it. Fear, maybe, or awe, or something deeper, like the ground shifting underneath everything I thought I understood. We got there in time, no complications. The nurses whisked her away while I filled out paperwork with a shaking hand, and when they let me in, she was already in a hospital gown, hooked to machines, the rhythmic beeping strangely comforting. She looked at me through the sweat and the pain and the tension, and said, "I'm glad you're here." And I was, even if I didn't understand what it meant yet, even if I still carried the weight of everything between us like a second skin. The labor dragged on for hours, and I sat beside her the whole time, wiping her forehead, holding her hand, whispering encouragement like it could somehow make the pain more bearable, and when the moment finally came, when I heard the cry of a brand new life break through the noise and exhaustion and fear, I felt something collapse inside me. Not pain this time, not betrayal, something else, something bigger. They placed the baby in her arms, and she cried, not quietly, not gracefully, but in full, gasping sobs that shook her whole body, and I sat beside her, stunned, silent, staring at this tiny human with dark hair and squinted eyes and a scream that seemed too loud for someone so small. "Do you want to hold him?" she asked, voice raw and hoarse. I nodded slowly, hands trembling as I reached out, and when she passed him to me, something broke open in me completely. He was warm and fragile and real, and I couldn't believe he existed, couldn't believe this strange twist of fate had brought him here, to me. Even if I hadn't created him, even if I still struggled with how he came to be, there he was, a perfect, blinking reminder that life doesn't wait for your emotions to catch up. I looked down at him and whispered, "Hey there, little man," and his tiny fingers curled instinctively around mine, like he already knew I'd be there. And in that moment, something shifted again, a quiet decision, not shouted or dramatic, just known, deep and solid. I was going to be his father. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, not even for Leah, but because I wanted to, because some part of me that had been bruised and broken now saw a reason to keep going. A few days later, we came home, the three of us, and it was surreal, like trying to walk through a dream you weren't sure was yours. The house felt different now, like it had been holding its breath for months and finally exhaled. I slept on the couch the first few nights, not because I wasn't welcome in the bed, but because I still needed space, still needed to find my footing, and Leah understood without me having to say it. We were learning to be parents together, fumbling through feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights, and somewhere in that chaos, the sharp edges between us started to dull. One evening, maybe a week after we got back, I came into the nursery to find Leah asleep in the rocking chair, the baby cradled against her chest, her face soft and peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in months. I stood there for a while, just watching, listening to the soft hum of her breath and his tiny sighs, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Tired, yes, uncertain, definitely, but the fire that had been burning inside me since that envelope arrived was finally out. Later that night, as we stood in the kitchen reheating leftovers, I said, "I want to name him Eli." She turned to me, surprised. "You do?" I nodded. "It means ascended. Feels fitting, don't you think? After everything." Her eyes welled up, and she whispered, "Yeah, it does." We didn't hug, didn't kiss, didn't say anything romantic, but something passed between us in that moment, a quiet thread of shared understanding that maybe, just maybe, the future could look different from the past. A few weeks after that, I did something I didn't expect. I sent Ethan a letter, not long, not bitter, just honest. "I don't forgive you. Not fully. Maybe not ever. But I'm trying to move forward. I thought you should know that the baby is healthy. His name is Eli. And I'm raising him as my own. I hope you find your own peace someday." I didn't send it for him, really, I sent it for me, because I needed to let go of the weight I'd been carrying, even if just a little. He never wrote back, and that was fine. Some chapters don't need to be reopened, they just need to be closed with care. As the months passed, life became a new kind of normal, not like before, never like before, but something sturdy, something worth waking up for. Leah and I didn't rush anything, we took it slow, small steps, quiet conversations, shared coffee and laughter and the occasional brush of hands that lingered a little too long. And one night, while we stood on the porch watching the sun set, she looked at me and said, "Do you think there's still something left for us?" I didn't answer right away, just reached out and laced my fingers through hers, and said, "I think there's something new. And maybe that's better." She smiled, tears in her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Not because the past had disappeared, not because the pain had vanished, but because I'd chosen to carry it without letting it control me. I looked at her, at the life we were slowly building again, and then at Eli, asleep inside, and I thought, this isn't the life I planned. But maybe it's the life I was meant to fight for.